Welcome.
Welcome.
I Don't Get the Bible podcast.
1 Corinthians chapter 7, part 1.
Part 1. All right. Begins with, now for the matters you wrote about, which we touched on, but it implies they wrote to him.
Yes.
And I did like a very quick little search on what other people think about that. And it seems like they were saying they wrote to him with like specific issues, more or less, for advice. But, which it kind of makes sense, like as he starts to like touch on, certain issues. So the first one he says, now for the matters you wrote about, quotation mark, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. So I'm under the impression that's what they wrote to him about. Is that what you're saying?
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not him saying.
No, it sounds like
it's
he's answering the question, is it okay for men and women to have sexual relations?
Yeah. Okay, right. That's not his. Okay. And he says, but since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife and each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife and likewise the wife to her husband. And the whole chapter is kind of like this. But so he says, since it is occurring, but since sexual immorality is occurring, each man. So it sounds like that advice, which people will probably take and apply themselves today, is him responding to that question. Would you say?
I would.
Okay. So since sexual immorality is occurring, so what was sexual immorality to them then?
Well, remember at Corinth, there was the pagan princess prostitutes. There was that.
Yeah.
There was the instance earlier when the son was sleeping with the father's wife. It was just mayhem in Corinth.
Okay. So, like, he's basically
laying out the way it should be.
The way it should be. Each man should have relations with his own wife, each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife.
Yeah.
And likewise, the wife to her husband, which is to have sex with them?
Yeah. That's how people read it.
Okay. And
you have a marital duty.
And why is it that I feel like I've only ever heard it the one direction? The woman does it for her husband, but not the husband to the wife.
I don't know, but it's
both
there. Yeah. Yeah.
That's very odd.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to read it was written both
Yeah.
ways, to be honest.
Yeah. And the other thing about that I love is the fact that he is limiting it to a husband and a wife.
Yeah.
And he is not including wives.
Yeah.
And he's not including husbands. It's 1-to-1, just like God is 1-to-1. And anything more or different is a reflection of polytheism, many gods. So he's sticking to the plan there in his recommendation. I like that.
Okay, but there's the argument that is literally him responding to their question to like keep the peace in that time. And he'll kind of go into that later, like this is to get you through till he comes back, sort of. So it's kind of not
applicable,
relevant now, would you say?
Well, I think that the model was started in Genesis. I think he is echoing that model, and I think it's still relevant. If you want a healthy relationship with somebody, it's going to be monogamous.
Okay.
That's all he's really essentially saying. And if you want monogamy to work out, the husband should be dutiful to the wife, and the wife should be dutiful to the husband. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I don't think because it was given to them that today it changes. A lot of people try to change it. They try to mix up all kinds of ways, but I think that's pretty much the standard.
Well, why wouldn't you say that about like the woman speaking in church and stuff then?
Well, this is the thing, and this is why it's very difficult to exegete or interpret Scripture, because there are times when it's obvious it was cultural.
Yeah.
But there's other instances in Scripture, like Genesis, when God created And Moses says, and for this reason, the man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. When you have other instances supporting it, you can say that this instance is in harmony with the general principle that should exist. Women not speaking in church was certainly a cultural thing.
Okay.
So you have to use your brain and you have to kind of make decisions.
And monogamy wasn't a cultural thing.
Well, it gets really tough here. First of all, to the Gentile world, monogamy was not. Okay. But to a Jew, the man could have extra wives, but the wife could only have one husband.
Wait. Sorry. To Gentiles, monogamy was what they did?
No.
It was not what they did.
Not typically.
So Jews, the only people doing monogamy here were Jews in one direction.
In one direction, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then this is like unheard of advice then. It's not him saying stick with what your culture has always done. It's him saying stick with just your partner.
Yeah. Yeah, he's taking it beyond, because in the Old Testament, a man could visit a prostitute so long as she wasn't from one of the 7 nations and so long as she wasn't married. If she was married, the man couldn't touch her. So it opened it up a little more liberally for people in ancient Israel. Things tightened up down the line, but in ancient Israel, those things were permitted. So were extra wives.
Okay. So, like, what percent? Okay. So you would say he is speaking to them then, right here. But because he's going to say a lot more stuff that is almost contradictory, but like, it's just to like get them to the end goal, which is him returning.
And that means unity.
Unity.
If he opened it up, it would be disastrous. So he's bringing it in for them then to say, this is how it's going to bring unity. Husband to wife, wife to husband. That's it.
Okay. And that's in response to them asking if it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. That's their assumption.
Yeah, because it could have been that men were thinking that they should be holy in their marriages and not to have relations with their wives, which would create more division. So he's saying you have a duty to your body's not your own and her body's not her own.
Yeah, so that's what he's going to say next. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband doesn't have authority, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent, and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer. Then come back together, so that Satan doesn't tempt you because of your lack of self-control.
Yes!
It's very weird.
It is so weird. It's really pragmatic.
Yeah.
And Satan was going about as a roaring lion, seeking who he could entice. But the problem sounds like husbands were trying to be holy and abstain. And
well, based on that first question,
Yeah.
I kind of didn't read it that way, but now it's pretty clear.
Yeah, it seems like that. I don't know. We don't know.
No. Yeah, I just am a bad reader.
And now, is that part of today's world of fulfillment? I don't think so. That abstaining, for a time and all that, I think it was very for them.
Okay. Because then he says, I say this as a concession, not as a command. I wish that all of you were as I am, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. Which I don't know what that means, why he says that about gifts right there.
I don't either. I don't know what that means. But he is saying, I wish you could be like me, unmarried.
Yeah. Okay. So that means celibate.
Yeah.
Unmarried.
Married.
Unmarried means celibate, right? Celibacy. I'm trying to see if other versions phrase that differently because
I'm sure they do.
That's very odd that he said, but each of you has your own gift from God. Yeah. One has this gift, one has another. But I speak this by permission and not of commandment. For I, with the Almighty, even as myself, But every man hath this proper gift of God, one after this manner, another after that. That's in the King James.
So it's like he's saying, if you can be married, that's a one man. If you're not married, that's another man. But
Yeah.
he admits right there, this is not by inspiration.
Okay.
I'm saying this from my own mind.
Right. As a concession, not a command. Okay.
Yeah.
And to keep the unity. So then he goes on to say, now to the unmarried and the widows, I say it's good for them to stay unmarried as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion.
Now, with passion was added there, I think.
Oh.
Because in the...
Than to burn?
Than to burn. Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
That's
what
a
it
big
says.
difference.
A big difference. And in that latter sense, it means it's better to marry than to be unworthy, unholy, not pure, and to burn at the coming of Christ. Yeah. But I'd have to look at the Greek to see if with passion is added there. Look at Young's. Young's will tell you if that's...
What's the incentive to change that?
To bring it into more harmony with lust for the flesh.
But why, like, it's the people that changed things to, like, more emphasize the idea of, like, hell and eternal punishment and stuff that are reducing the idea of hell here.
Yeah, but they're also increasing the idea of if you burn with lust, you're in trouble. Okay. So it's better to be married and burn in your lust for each other, which is permitted by God, but not outside of that.
Okay. Aren't they saying then to burn with, like, it's better to marry than to burn in hell, which means if you go out, you'll burn in hell. I feel like the other one's harsher, right? Do you hear
it's
what
not
I'm
in
saying?
hell necessarily. It's better to marry than to burn, meaning at his coming. He's coming with fire. Oh. He's returning to the bride. It's going to come with fire. Okay. And so Jerusalem and everything was literally burned up by the Romans, scorched earth. So he's saying it's better to marry and be part of the body, holy and pure in that way, than to burn it with what's coming. Okay. That's how I've always interpreted it. But if with passion can be justified, then I'm wrong.
Okay, so, but this is also to say there is a preference, like he's saying, it's better to marry, like, which is associated with their holiness and being their purity. Yeah. So there are things that are going to keep them. Yeah. In this whole thing about marriage and how to handle it, it sounds like he's like, this is good, but it's not a commandment. Yeah. But now we're saying there are things that are required for purity to be taken.
Right.
Sort of.
And one of those is if you're going to have sex, you better be married.
Okay. That's the rule here. Right. Right?
Yeah. The problem is that sex was marriage to a Jew. That is always the Old Testament stance of it. So it sounds like it's better to marry than to sleep with a lot of people. That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay. But the ideal is to not marry and not have sex.
That's what he says.
Okay.
Yeah. Which totally goes against God's plan.
Okay.
Which is why we know it's only for that day.
Okay. I have that question. Like, that advice, we've talked about this so much because I've wondered, like, marriage seems like such an integral, like, duty of someone that calls himself a Christian for some reason, mm-hmm. and children. And I've took a lot of time to, like, tease that apart, but, like, and you would quote that and be like, Paul says it's better to not, but that does seem like advice for that time, because, like, how do you multiply?
It's completely for that time. Because if the Christians really wanted to be devout after that time, they would never marry. And so the Christians would be like a little community. That's what ruined the Shaker religion, is they said, we won't marry and have children. They vanished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like extinguished.
So it was for that time.
Okay.
Although I've known several people, girls especially, who've never married.
Yeah.
In fact, I had lunch with a man who is never married. Yeah. And he's devout.
Like recently?
Yeah, 2 days ago with Danny.
So, like, as a principal, or out
He
of
wanted
principle?
to, but it just didn't work. He's old. He's
Yeah.
my age now, a little few years younger, but he's never married.
In
So
the Jewish sense, or in the legal sense?
I think he's never legally married anybody.
Okay.
Yeah, but he doesn't live with wild abandon.
Yeah.
He has learned to temper himself. I don't know how people do that.
Yeah. But so just the clarification. So in Jews' time, was it commanded that they marry? Like, did they have to marry?
No, but it was strongly, strongly encouraged, because
Okay.
that is how you would bring forth joy. A quiver full of children is a joyous thing, and they were commanded in the garden to multiply and replenish the earth. So they took that seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Jesus comes.
Yeah.
Then there's this time until he returns. That's the time where he's like, it's better to just not
Yeah.
even touch that.
Yeah.
Because he says in a minute, it's very quick that it's coming.
Yeah.
And then after he returns, we just are free to do whatever we
We're
want.
open to live any way we want without any of this stuff.
Okay.
Now,
But
I don't
there are
mean
principles.
licentiously.
Yeah.
But the principle is, look if you're going to go out and be a Christian, you have to bang a bunch of people, you should probably get married. You can't control yourself. It's a better way to live.
Yeah. It's like the principles that were driving the law there still are sort of applicable because we're humans and they were humans, and that's
Right.
how God was relating to humans.
Yeah.
And that's how we're made, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like how sex and marriage helps a person or doesn't help a person.
Right. And it's not good for men to be alone. Now, God doesn't say it's not good for women to be alone. It's really funny. But men are disasters when we're alone, typically speaking. Marriage is ordained of God, and it's God being one, plural in my estimation, is a reflection of marriage.
Yeah.
And I think that it's ridiculous if anybody said marriage is not a good thing. It is a good thing, but it's got to be done. I started to think about things this way. There's a right way, there's a good way, and there's an evil way. And that is the way we see things in this world today. Right, good, or evil.
What's right?
Right is having one partner, is being married for life, not having others, not tearing apart your unity, and being one and struggling through all that includes. That's the right way. A good way is to live the best you can. If you got divorced, you do your best with fixing it. You try to raise your kids up. The bad way is to live any way you want, get married, get divorced, don't marry, yeah.
Okay. I see. Damn, I had a question.
And here's the thing, the right way is tough. It's the deontological way. It means that it doesn't necessarily, and here's the thing. In fact, I'm going to talk about that in a couple weeks but deontology says you do it not because it's going to produce something good. You do it because it's right. And that is the stumbling block for people. They don't get it.
That is huge. That's the good route, and we've been having a lot of personal talks about how faith might lead you to do something that the world in the moment would be like, you're ruining the world for doing that.
Right.
But in fact, you're just pushing the world to be better in a certain way.
Right.
Or I don't know,
Yeah.
it doesn't return immediate effects that we would think are always good.
Right.
I have trouble with, and loving too, what love looks like.
Yeah. Because you're loving people who are really troubling.
Yeah.
The good way would be to put them in their place and make a good organization. You get rid of the riffraff, right? I'm talking about that tonight. But the right way is you love. And that doesn't build organizations. That makes them not work as well as they should.
It breaks them down.
Yeah.
Love does
You
not
get it?
work in
So God's
systems.
ways are not always going to profit here. And that's the difference between people who say, that doesn't make any sense. I'm doing it my way, that, a good way or an evil way. His is the right way.
And right, I feel like I'm circling right now, but right, which is one partner, whatever, that comes from a really holistic view of the scripture.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because there's all these different scriptures that say a lot of different things about marriage and sex across it over time.
Yeah.
And your take is that the right is one partner, whatever.
Yeah. And I borrow that from the creation.
Okay.
Yeah. It was Cain's son who introduced polygamy, which has been nothing but a sorrow to humankind. But that's a will of man. You see, the right way was given to us as a model in the garden.
Okay.
Yeah. And the whole world turns from that.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, I was about to argue, that seems right today too, in terms of like how it functions. But there are plenty of people arguing that it's not right at all in terms of how it functions. It doesn't work. We aren't built that way, blah, blah, blah. It's like their outcome that they're looking for is different than what we're looking for, though. So
self-satisfaction. It's their own personal happiness.
So right is always judged on if it produces more faith and love. Because right to somebody else that doesn't want faith and love as their ultimate goal is not going to say choosing one partner. They'll choose good or they'll choose evil, even based on what they're going for.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how you judge what's right.
Yeah. It's what God says.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is the deontology that we try to live by. And it is so ridiculous to people. I mean, people say, we got to live together to see if we're sexually compatible.
Yeah.
So what they do is they say, in my marriage, sex is the focus, right? It's a part of marriage. But, after a number of years, the honeymoon's over. You're raising kids. You're trying to struggle and then you get older and all that starts to fade. But we focus on that compatibility. It's the stupidest, most myopic, limited view, but we think we're smart. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is, Tom. Well, we're at 22 minutes.
We've gone over.
We'll keep going on the next one. See ya.